You remember the little man in the red pointy hat. He rode a fox through the forest. He had a beard you could lose your car keys in, and his voice sounded like the warmest grandpa who ever lived. That part you remember. Do you remember how it ended? Because somewhere in the back of your skull, there is a memory you are not totally sure is real. The one where he and his wife walk up into the mountains, lay down in the grass, and quietly turned into trees, ending their long lives. On purpose, while their fox sat beside them and grieved. And you have quietly spent your whole adult life wondering if you'd made that up. You didn't make it up. Most cartoons end with a party. This one ended with the main characters becoming landscaping. Let's go back to the Nick Jr. block, sometime in the late 1980s, when a Spanish cartoon about a 400-year-old forest doctor aired between your juice box and your nap, and casually handed the entire generation of preschoolers their very first lesson on death. This is the world of David the Gnome, and it is so much stranger than you remember. Here is the first thing nobody tells you. David the Gnome did not start as a cartoon. It started as a fake science book. In 1976, two Dutch guys published a book simply called Gnomes. And they did not write it like a fairy tale. They wrote it like a field guide. Anatomy, diet, lifespan, mating habits, household customs. The whole thing was presented as if gnomes were a real, undiscovered species that some very serious researchers had been studying out in the woods with a clipboard. One of those guys, Will Huygen, was an actual physician. The other, Rian Portley, was a naturalist illustrator so good he could make you believe a tiny bearded man was hiding inside every mushroom in Europe. So sit with that for a second. The reason David feels less like a cartoon mascot and more like a tiny general practitioner who happens to live under a tree is because he was literally written by a doctor. This is fake biology with suspenders. And it worked. By 1980, the gnome craze was already a full retail category. The New Yorker, an actual prestige magazine, was writing about gnome merchandise flying off shelves during the holidays. Which means America had already been softened up by the miniature bearded man industrial complex before the cartoon even showed up. Then Spain got involved. A producer named Claudio Biern Boyd took the gnome lore and turned it into a television series in 1985. And Biern was not some random guy. In Europe, they called him the Spanish Walt Disney. He is the same man who gave the world Dogtanian and the Three Musky Hounds and Around the World with Willy Fogg. So when I say David the Gnome was made by a heavy hitter, I mean it. This was a major international export wearing a tiny red hat. But here is the thing about Biern you need to file away, because we are absolutely coming back to it. He had one rule for children's television. It had to teach you something. Hold that thought. Because what this man decided to teach a room full of toddlers is genuinely unhinged. Let me reframe this entire show for you in one sentence, and I need you to actually hear it. David the Gnome is not an adventure cartoon. It is an eco-medical drama for people who cannot read yet. David is not a hero. He is a doctor. That is his literal job. He makes house calls. He sets broken wings, he treats poisonings, he diagnoses sick animals, and he rides a fox named Swift across the forest like the world's smallest, fuzziest ambulance. While American cartoons were busy selling you a playset with 17 separate accessories, David the Gnome was out here running a woodland emergency room. And once you see that, you cannot unsee the next part, the villains. You think the bad guys were the trolls, big, dumb, green, always tumbling off a cliff. And sure, they were there for comic relief, but the trolls were never the real enemy. Go back and watch. The actual recurring villain of David the Gnome is us. Humans, hunters with traps, farmers with pesticides, people dumping poison into a world that was alive and fragile and counting on somebody to notice. There is an episode where a little gnome girl eats a strawberry that a human sprayed with pesticide and nearly dies. There is another where a man traps wild birds to sell to a pet store, and David and Lisa pull off what is essentially a tiny animal rights rescue operation. The cute gnome was not there just to be cute. He was there to diagnose a broken world and gently inform a 4-year-old that the broken part was, frequently, their dad. Now let us talk casting, because the English version did not come to play. David was voiced by Tom Bosley, Mr. Cunningham from Happy Days, which is the exact reason he radiates that warm grandpa energy. And the narrator? Christopher Plummer, Captain Von Trapp himself, the man from The Sound of Music, narrated a preschool show about mushrooms as though the script had been personally blessed by Shakespeare. Your naptime cartoon had Oscar-caliber pipes and you had absolutely no idea. So why did it work? Why does this gentle little thing still live somewhere in your chest after all these years? Because it never once talked down to you. It treated a small child like someone who is fully capable of understanding big, serious, beautiful things. And that respect is exactly what is about to wreck you. Because we need to talk about the ending. The final episode is called The Mountains of Beyond, and it is the reason this show quietly haunts people. A piece of television that was aired on a children's network at children's television hours, and which contains perhaps the most emotionally complex ending in the entire history of Saturday morning cartoons. Here's what actually happens. David and Lisa know they are 400 years old, the maximum gnome lifespan, and so they decide it is simply time. They finish their affairs, write their journals, pack their things, and say goodbye to everyone. Their old friend Casper, a gnome bachelor, asks if he can come with them because he doesn't want to die alone, which is the most quietly devastating thing ever written into a children's show, and they say yes. And then the three of them walk up into the mountains. They find a spot they like. David turns to Swift, his loyal fox, his partner, his best friend across 4 centuries, and he gently shoos him away because he doesn't want Swift to see what happens next. And Swift trots off, confused and alone. That is the specific moment where every adult watching this in 2026 absolutely loses it. The fox has to leave. Swift doesn't understand. David and Lisa hold hands. They kiss, or because they're gnomes, they rub noses, which is gnome kissing, which is somehow even more tender, and they become trees, 2 beautiful apple trees on a mountain. Their spirits rise up and wave goodbye. The camera pulls back. The forest is quiet. And then the episode ended, and a 6-year-old somewhere in suburban Ohio looked at the television, looked down at their Cocoa Puffs, looked back at the television, and said, "Wait." And their parents had to explain death because Nick Jr. just did it first, without warning, at 9 o'clock in the morning, before they've even had their first cup of coffee. No reset button. No, it was all a dream. No miraculous last-second rescue. The show looked a 4-year-old dead in the eye and said, "Everything you love is temporary, and that is okay." And here is the real tea. The creator, Bjorn, later called that ending one of the biggest mistakes of his whole career, not because it was too dark, because the show became a gigantic international hit, and he had just permanently turned his main character into an oak. You cannot greenlight season 2 when your star is now a tree. He reportedly joked about the absurd logic of all of it. A guy who lived 400 years, never paid a dime in taxes, stayed happily married the entire time, and then simply returned to nature. Fans never let him forget it. Now I have to be fair, because there is some genuinely weird context orbiting this show. The English version was produced by a Canadian company called Cinar in association with Miramax. Yes, that Miramax. Which means if you follow the credits far enough down the rabbit hole, you eventually bump into the Weinstein name on a show about a gnome and his fox, which is a sentence I deeply hate that I just had to say out loud. And years later, Cinar itself got tangled up in a major accounting scandal, with allegations about disguising American writers under Canadian names to game content funding rules. None of that ever touched the little Spanish show about the forest doctor. But it is a profoundly strange neighborhood for sweet old David to have wandered into. But let us go back to those 2 trees. Here is what I think that show understood. The thing most grown-ups spend an entire lifetime trying to forget. It understood that you can be gentle with a child and still tell them the truth. We think we have to protect kids from the hard things, death, loss, the fact that nothing beautiful lasts forever. So we hand them noise and toys and 100 flashing colors, and we pray they never ask the big question. David the Gnome asked it for them, softly, without flinching once. And you did not just watch that show, you absorbed it. Somewhere underneath everything you have become, there is a 4-year-old who learned, before they could even tie their own shoes, that love means taking care of fragile things, that the world is alive and worth protecting, and that someday the people you love will lie down in the mountains, and you will have to be the fox who keeps going. You did not know that lesson
was going in. But it went in. And maybe that is why this one sits a little differently than the other cartoons. The others entertained you. This one prepared you. Long before Bluey ever made your parents cry on the living room floor, a 400-year-old gnome doctor sat you down, treated you like you could handle it, and taught you the single most important thing anyone ever teaches anybody. Everything ends. Love it anyway. So, if there is a tree out there somewhere that reminds you of someone you miss, go sit under it for a while. Let them know you still think about them. You'll still feel their presence looking out for you in the shelter of its shade. David would have liked that.
If this unlocked a memory you didn't even know you still had, this is the entire reason this channel exists. So do me a quick favor, tap the subscribe button, smash the like button, and send this to one of your friends who swears they remember a gnome cartoon that wrecked them as a kid, and nobody ever believed them that it really exists. Tell them they were not dreaming. So drink some water, go hug somebody old, and I will see you under the next tree.